What have you done? I did what I had to do.
The wind carried the scent of smoke and dust through the canyon as dusk fell, a smell that always made Alina's heart twist. Smoke meant strangers, and strangers meant danger. Her people had learned that the hard way. From the ridge above the valley, she had been watching the ranch all afternoon, hidden between the red rocks and the whispering sage. The white man's cattle roamed too close to their hunting trails again. Her brother had said to leave it alone, that one steer wasn't worth a bullet. But now, seeing the calf trapped in barbed wire and crying in pain, she couldn't turn away. Its screams echoed up the canyon walls, sharp and desperate like a wounded child. Alina descended quietly, her moccasins making no sound on the sand. The setting sun painted her copper skin in streaks of firelight, and her braids swayed against her back as she moved with the caution of a hunter, but her heart beat like someone heading into war. She reached the edge of the wooden fence that marked the Holloway Ranch. Beyond it, a man was walking toward the sound, the rancher. She knew his name, Jack Holloway. He was the one her tribe whispered about. Said to have fought in the wars, said to have killed Apache men when he wore a soldier's hat. Now he was just a rancher, a quiet one, but she didn't trust quiet men. Quiet meant they were thinking. Quiet meant they remembered. Jack hadn't seen her yet. He was moving slow, the way one does when nearing a frightened animal. He crouched beside the calf, murmuring softly as he inspected the wire biting deep into its leg. His horse stood a few yards away, ears twitching. Alina's grip on her bow tightened. Her father used to say that every act of mercy in a war was a mistake. You hesitate, he told her once, and they build fences around your soul. So when Jack reached for his knife, Alina stepped out from behind the brush. Stop, she said sharply. The word cracked across the field like a shot. The rancher froze mid-motion, his knife hovering in the air. Slowly, he turned his head, eyes finding her through the twilight. She was young, no more than 20, but the bow she held was steady, her dark eyes fierce. Jack had seen Apaches before, but never one who looked like that, like she'd stepped straight out of the desert and challenged the world to breathe wrong. He raised both hands, palms out, voice calm. Easy now, don't move, Alina said. Her English was halting, but her tone made the meaning clear. She walked closer, each step deliberate, until she stood only 10 paces away. The calf bleated weakly beside him, struggling against the wire. What do you want? He asked quietly. Not want, she said. End it. Jack frowned. You mean? She nodded once, eyes hard. Please. Just make it fast. He looked from her to the animal. The wire had cut so deep he could see bone. He'd seen men put down horses before, seen that look in their eyes when the fight left them. But hearing the plea from her lips, the word, please, trembling just slightly, something in him shifted. He'd killed before. Soldiers had told him that some people are born to it. He'd believed that once. But now, kneeling beside a crying calf and an Apache girl aiming death at his chest, he didn't believe in killing anymore. He didn't move. For a long moment, the desert went still. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The only sound was the faint, labored breathing of the calf. The sun dipped behind the ridge, and shadows stretched long across the dirt. Alina's bowstring quivered. She had expected him to do it quickly, to draw the knife across the creature's throat and be done. She wanted him to, needed him to. The sight of suffering burned something deep inside her chest, a wound she couldn't name. But he didn't move. What are you waiting for? She demanded. Jack swallowed hard, his jaw tightening. Because maybe there's another way. There isn't, she said flatly. It hurts. So do we, he murmured. All of us. His voice was low, the kind a man uses when talking to the ghosts of his past. For a heartbeat, he thought she might loose the arrow. Her eyes narrowed, anger flashing like lightning. You think I don't know pain? She said. Jack didn't answer. He didn't need to. He could see it in the way she stood, the stiffness of someone who had seen too much death too young. Finally, He spoke again, slow and even. Let me help it another way. Her brow furrowed. What way? He glanced at the wire. By setting it free. She hesitated. Her father would have called him a liar. White men didn't free things, they owned them. But something in his eyes stopped her arrow cold. They were tired eyes, hollow but not cruel. You moved wrong, she warned. I won't, he said. Jack lowered his hands slowly, keeping his gaze locked on hers. Then he crouched beside the calf again. The knife glinted once in the fading light as he reached for the wire, his movements slow and deliberate. The animal kicked weakly, but he spoke to it in a steady voice, words she couldn't quite catch, something about holding on. He began cutting through the barbed strands, one by one. The metal sliced his hands open, thin lines of blood marking the dirt. Still, he didn't stop. Alina's bow trembled. She didn't understand what she was seeing. Why would he risk his hands for something so small? So helpless. The desert grew darker, the first stars blinking awake overhead. Each sound, the rasp of the knife, the soft moan of the calf, the whisper of wind, seemed to fall into rhythm, like a heartbeat shared between them. At last, the final strand of wire snapped loose. The calf jerked, stumbled, then limped away into the tall grass, leaving a trail of blood behind it. Jack leaned back, breathing hard, his hands shaking. Elena didn't lower her bow. Not yet. She stared at the man, his palms torn and bleeding, the knife fallen to the dirt beside him. And though she said nothing, something inside her, some wall built of generations of anger, shifted just slightly. The rancher looked up at her then, and the world felt impossibly still. That was when he did the unthinkable. He smiled. Not the cold kind, not the arrogant kind she expected, but a tired, human smile that said, "You don't have to be afraid anymore." And for the first time in her life, Elena didn't know whether to run, or to listen. Would you like me to now expand part 2, around 900, 1000 words, to match this tone and complete the story? Ack's smile lingered for only a moment before it slipped away, replaced by exhaustion. His hands were shaking, blood trickling down his fingers, the knife lying dull beside him. The wind stirred again, carrying the smell of rust, sage, and something like rain. Elena still hadn't lowered her bow. The arrow's tip trembled slightly in the dim light, and she could feel her heart thundering against her ribs. He could have lunged at her, could have drawn that knife in a second. But he hadn't. He'd freed the animal instead. It didn't make sense. Why you do that? She asked quietly, her voice almost swallowed by the wind. Jack wiped his hand on his sleeve, leaving a dark streak of red. Because pain don't stop by adding more of it. Her brows knitted. That calf, it yours? He shook his head. No, but it was stuck on my land. That makes it my problem. Something about the way he said it, calm, almost resigned, made her chest tighten. Her people believed that everything you touched left a mark on your spirit. Maybe this man believed the same, in his own way. Elena finally eased the tension in the string. The arrow slipped back into her quiver. Still, she kept the bow in her hand as she stepped closer. The night had fully taken the sky now, the stars burning bright above them. You should go, Jack said, voice low. If someone rides up and sees you here, it won't go well. You afraid? She asked, tilting her head. He smiled faintly. Not for me. That caught her off guard. Most white men she'd met, or avoided, feared nothing but their pride. This one feared for someone else. Your people take from us, she said, her tone sharper now. Our river, our horses, even our dead. Jack nodded slowly. I know. You say nothing. What can I say that would matter? He asked. Words don't fix what's already burned. His voice carried a sadness that seemed to reach into the bones of the earth itself. She didn't know what to make of him, this man who talked like he'd already buried too much of himself to still fight. He reached for a canteen hanging on his saddle and poured water over his bleeding hands. The water turned red, then dark against the soil. Elena watched in silence. The scent of iron mixed with the faint sweetness of sage. Somewhere in the dark, Coyotes began to yip. Jack glanced at her again. You got a name? She hesitated, then said, Elena. He nodded once. Pretty name. She almost smiled, but stopped herself. Compliments were weapons too, her mother used to say. The rancher seemed to know when to stop talking, though, and the quiet between them felt almost natural. Your people still camp in the canyon? He asked after a while. Her eyes narrowed. Why you want to know? I don't, he said quickly. I just figured I should keep my cattle away from there. They drink from the same river, right? Her suspicion softened just a fraction. You, move them, if I can. She stared at him, searching his face for any hint of mockery, but found none. Maybe he was lying. Maybe not. Either way, the thought that someone might actually listen, it stirred something uneasy in her. The moon rose higher, a pale coin above the hills. The wind had cooled, brushing across her cheeks. Jack crouched again and picked up his hat from the dirt. You know, he said, glancing toward where the calf had limped away, most folks out here would have shot that little thing without thinking twice. I would have, she admitted. He gave a short nod. Then maybe I'm the fool. No, she said quietly. Maybe you just remember what it feels like to be caught. That made him pause. He looked at her then, not the way a man looks at a stranger, but like he was trying to remember something long forgotten. My father died in a war, he said softly. Said it was for this land. But the land never asked for it. My father died for the same, she replied. But we lose it anyway. Their words hung between them like smoke, fragile but real. Jack stood slowly, testing his sore hands. You should go, Elena. Before the riders make their rounds. She didn't move right away. You think this changed something? He sighed. Maybe not for the world. But maybe for us. For a long moment, neither spoke. The desert stretched out wide and endless around them. The stars burned fierce above, and in their cold light, the lines between enemy and friend seemed to blur. Finally, Elena turned to leave. She walked to the fence and stopped, resting a hand on one of the wooden posts. You keep your cattle from the river, she said without turning. If they come again, I won't warn you next time. I believe you, he said simply. She looked back once, her eyes meeting his. And you, keep your knife ready. The desert don't forgive kindness. He gave a half smile. Neither do people. Then she was gone, vanishing into the brush as quietly as she had come, the faint whisper of her footsteps lost to the night. Jack stood alone in the darkness, the ache in his hands dull but constant. He stared toward the hills where the girl had disappeared. Somewhere beyond them lay the canyon her people still called home, a place his kind had taken piece by piece until nothing sacred was left. He sheathed the knife and picked up his reins, but for a long while he didn't move. He just stood there, listening to the night, to the wind, to the faint echo of her words. Maybe she was right. Maybe kindness was just another wound the world didn't know how to heal. But tonight, something had changed in him. Something small, like the flicker of a match in the dark. The calf's trail led toward the open plains, where the moonlight made the grass shimmer like silver. Jack watched it go until it vanished into the horizon. Not everything wild deserves to die slow, he murmured. And though no one was there to hear it, the words seemed to carry, across the fields, over the river, into the silent hills where the Apache girl walked under the stars, replaying in her mind the image of a man who had chosen mercy instead of fear. For the first time in her life, Elena didn't see all white men as one face. And for the first time in his, Jack Holloway realized that the West wasn't something to be conquered, it was something to learn to live with. When dawn broke, there would be new fences to mend, new grudges waiting, new battles between land and blood. But tonight, under the quiet sky, there was only the echo of two hearts that had found, however briefly, a common rhythm. And that was unthinkable enough.